Welcome to Fobs HQ. Today is November the 18th of 2025, and after about 6 years, the government, the Senate, and the House are finally, officially, supposedly, going to release the Epstein files. Before we get into this video, I do want to say, as I always say in some of the political videos that I make, I am of the belief that both of these sides are useless. They are two wings of the same birds, and I don't think that they have Americans' best interest at heart. So I say that because a lot of people are new to the channel, and I have to explain that because if I make a statement that is pro-Democrat or pro-Republican, some people will comment and say, oh, you're this, you're that. Because people are, that simple-minded. They want to put you in a box, and then they want to say, hey, this and that, instead of arguing the main point. Back in 2006, when Jeffy was released from jail and he got a slap on the wrist, he was arrested and then he was released. And then eventually in 2019, he was arrested by federal agents at the airport in New Jersey for sex trafficking of minors and conspiracy. If you haven't been paying attention in the last 5 years, when Epstein was arrested, we had Trump that was the president, then we had Biden, and now we have Trump again. So both of these parties have had multiple years to release these documents. So at no point during this entire video are you going to hear me blame one side or the other side, because both of them are to blame. Both of these parties, Republicans and Democrats, have been slacking on releasing these documents. And like the number one excuse that both of them are using, oh, the victim's this, the victim's that, and some of the victims have came out and said that they want the files released. So that excuse is not appropriate if you ask me. Let's take a look here and see what Trump had to say about the bill. He said, I don't care when the Senate passes the House bill, whether tonight or at some other time in the near future. I just don't want Republicans to take their eyes off all of the victories that we've had, including the great, big, beautiful bill, closed borders, no men and women's sports. Men and women's sports, I don't think should be something that the president should be dealing with. This is one of those subjects where these are things that should be able to be handled by the people running these sports. If you ask me, it's one of those subjects that's used to distract people, and it's used to take up multiple months and weeks of people just babbling from the left and the right, and these people just fighting each other, so that we're spending time on dumb subjects like these instead of spending time trying to solve real issues. Because if you think about it, a president spends their time being president there for 4 years, and if they spent 3 months talking about whether a man should be in a woman's sport, this is just something that should be handled at a lower level, not something that requires the attention of the entire country, especially when it comes to sports. Like, sports are just, don't even get me started on sports. Anyways, ending DEI, stopping Biden records. Said DEI was actually a very important thing. And I say that because people who are on the left view DEI as like spreading diversity and including everybody and not excluding people. But in reality, what it was a racist policy, because statistically speaking, companies were hired more diverse people than hiring people. They were hiring people based on whether the skin of their color, as opposed to whether or not they were a fit for the job. Stopping Biden's record inflation, biggest tax and regulation cuts in history. To who? To me? To the middle class? There was some improvement as far as overtime taxes, but it's not across the board. Stopping 8 wars, that was a big thing so far. Being respected by every country in the world, having trillions of dollars invested in the USA, having created the hottest country anywhere in the world, and even delivering a huge defeat to the Democrats on the shutdown. I don't think this is something that should be stated. Yeah, like, you defeated the only other side that's a competition to you. Why is it a big deal? Because they have opposing views? Yeah, okay, but as a country, should we be more interested in fighting each other instead of fighting the real issues that affect everybody, not just a 1-2% of the population? So a whole lot of nothing was said there, if you ask me. And also, when it comes to chomos being, it's like a prison/jail acronym for child molesters. When it comes to chomos, I don't think that a president should start out by saying, I don't care. When it comes to chomos, like, you don't care that minors were taken advantage of, that kids were being sex trafficked, that you don't care. So that statement is just out of line for me, I think. Anyways, the House overwhelmingly approved a bill demanding that the Justice Department release all files related to its investigation into the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, a one-time friend of President Trump. See, this is when I read statements like that, and I'm reading them from, in this case, the New York Times. It doesn't matter if it's the New York Times, CNN, Fox News, whatever it is. This is a very one-sided statement. Like, you can make the same statement about a one-time friend of Bill Clinton, Hillary, what's the freaking prince's name out there in Europe or whatever. Like, anyways, Trump had pushed hard to head off the vote, but ultimately caved to the pressure from his party, saying over the weekend that he would support the bill. 427 to a one vote. Actually, it's not a one vote, and we're going to be going over the people he either voted no or voted against it or decided to not vote at all, which is kind of surprising if you ask me, because everybody should be voting when it comes to chomos. I think as a country, we can all agree that molesting children is a bad thing. The survivors blew kisses and shouted thank you to the House floor as some wiped tears from their eyes. I think it's a good thing that these files are being released. I think it sucks that we had to wait 6 years for them to come out, and I think it's an embarrassment to how the government functions overall. I understand that investigations of this size and nature need to be handled with a lot of care, because if you mess one thing up, you mess a lot of things up, and then you can't charge people who should be going to jail end up getting released. So there's a lot of things that need to be taken into account, and I understand that taking 1 or 2, 3 years maybe, but after like the third year, you've got to be like, we need to do something about it. The people are asking questions, and so we know that the wheels of the government turn very slowly. We eventually got there, slowly but surely. But back in September the 18th, the Democrats wanted to amend the release of the Epstein files to the bill that was basically responsible for the government shutdown. And if you ask me, this is just a political stunt from the Democrats. But given that it is, and now as we see it, a bipartisan agreement that these files be released, it shouldn't have been an issue then when it was. That's why when you look at the bill that stopped the government from functioning for the whole month, which some people barely even notice, right? To paint a picture, back in September 10th, we are voting on funding the security of the country. And Schumer here, you can see Schumer here with the gang, the Democrat gang, they get together and they're like, hey, I know what we should add to this bill. I know that the conversation here at the table at this current time is in regards to funding the defense of the country, but I think that maybe we should, and not just defense, but also like food stamps and all this other stuff that some people rely on. I know that we're talking about this, but let's go ahead and add the Epstein files to this. Now, if you ask me, I don't think that's an issue. I understand that sometimes either party's going to want to add something to a bill. So you have a bill that's focused on one subject, right? Or maybe multiple subjects. And then you have an amendment that gets attached to that bill so that they can both pass and we can get working on something, right? I don't think it should have been stopped. So the bill back in September 10th, as we know, should have been passed because everybody agrees that at least now everybody agrees that they should have been released. The question becomes, why weren't they released then? Why did people vote no on it back in September the 10th? So here's the amendment back in September the 10th, amendment number 3849. These are all the people who voted yes, most of them being Republic. You can tell because they have that little R there, Republican, what state they represent. And then you have all the no's, which was 49 of them. These are people who had voted against it. The interesting thing about the amendment that was being added on September the 10th is that it was led by the Democrats. And when you take a look at the people who voted no on it, it's 49% of them were Democrats. So they're like, let's add the release of the Epstein files to the National Defense Bill for the year 2026. Let's add that in there, and then when it gets added on there, let's all just vote no on it. This is how dumb not just Democrats, but Republicans as well think the people are. It doesn't take a genius to know that because one person votes no on an amendment and then votes yes, or the other way around, doesn't mean that they don't support the amendment that they were trying to push. But I'm just pointing that out because it's kind of ironic. This is the National Defense Authorization Act that I was talking about. This is the main bill that was being voted on, and then you had your amendment. The reason why I explain it like that is because some people don't understand how bills become laws, because we've lost that knowledge back in middle school when it was taught, or high school. So sometimes you have to explain to people like, hey, this is an amendment. The amendment gets attached to the bill, and then it gets voted on, and then you also have amendments that are voted on as well. So like, for example, in this one, you had 884 amendments, which is crazy. So this time around in November the 18th, we had the roll call. We had an entire bill devoted to Epstein, and 427 people voted that they should be released. One person voted no, and 5 people did not vote at all, because holding the people who remain to be held accountable, at least in the public eye, is not important to them. And these are the people. We got Greg from Texas. We got Michael. And if you guys want, I'll list off. He's a Democrat. It was both sides, okay? That had people that either voted no or didn't vote at all because they didn't think it was important. We have Michael from Ohio, Republican. We got Cheryl here from New Jersey, Democrat. We got Steve, Republican from Arkansas. We have Clay Higgins from Louisiana, Republican. I think he was the only one who voted no on it, or that might be incorrect. Donald here from Virginia, Democrat. So overall, a pretty good turnaround, if you ask me. But, I mean, these people, I don't know what they're doing, what their excuse is. I'd be interested to see what these people are saying. Back to the excuses that some Democrats were providing for not releasing the files back in September the 10th to the amendment that was attached to the bill that was responsible for the government shutdown. Some politicians said it was a political stunt. Doesn't matter. I mean, does it really matter if it's a political stunt if it means that the files are going to get released? Concerns about selective or partisan disclosure, I don't understand this. Because none of what was in the amendment, as far as I understand it, said that selective documents were going to be released. So I don't know why this would be a concern. And if the Democrats are selectively releasing, both sides would have access to the same files that both sides have access to. So if they could selectively release, so could the Republicans selectively release. So I don't think that's a concern. Privacy harm to innocent people. Most of the people who have been victims of these chomos already are coming out and saying that they want the files to be released. Some lawmakers suggested that the amendment was too broad and poorly written. I mean, again, it's about releasing the files. If it's too broad, what's the concern there? That they're going to release more files like in a way that didn't sufficiently account for redactions, victims' privacy. Again, the victims here are not the issue, or ongoing investigations. I am curious to find out what the ongoing investigations are. They were worried that a blanket release could undercut criminal justice norms or interfere with ongoing legal processes. Because I could definitely see a situation in where, like, let's say we're currently have somebody under investigation, right? Let's say it's Anthony Fauci as being one of the people who was flying on the plane, or like I imagine if they're currently under investigation and they don't know it, or they do know it, how I can definitely see how releasing some of these files would put those investigations in jeopardy. To sum it up, we have procedural pushback, concerns about privacy, and the claims of political grandstanding. What kind of political climate is the United States in where the release of files that are pertaining to child molesters is less important than whether or not somebody stands with their party or a president? These people care more about how their career looks and how it looks to the people who are supporting them than releasing files regarding child molesters. What it tells me is that these are people that don't care about doing the right thing. They care more about how they look to people, their friends, and to the establishment. So here we have Epstein survivors and lawmakers holding a conference ahead of the House. This is before the bill was passed. And I gotta say, some of the things that even some of these survivors are saying are dumb. They're buying into the identity politics instead of looking at what is on the table.
I do understand that your position has changed on the Epstein files, and I'm grateful that you have pledged to sign this bill.
So I do want to say that Trump's position on it has change, and it's flip-flop from when before he was elected. One of the things that he said that he was going to do was that he was going to release the files, and then he switched over to, why do people care about this, to, yeah, I don't really care if they're released or not. That to me is disingenuous and is concerning.
I can't help to be skeptical of what the agenda is.
So here's the thing, she's thinking about what the agenda is, right? Her concern is the agenda. Like, let's not talk about the Epstein files and whether or not let's release them. Let's think about what the plan is, what the 5D chess plans are for the Trump administration. Like, let's not focus on that, at least when it comes to releasing files pertaining to child molesters. Let's focus on why he's doing this. This is what I disagree with. Like, it sucks that this is the political environment that we're in, but it is what it is.
You have put us through so much stress, the lockdowns, the halt of these procedures that were supposed to have happened 50 days ago.
You can say the same thing about Biden. Biden had access to those documents as well for 4 years. So it's not just Again, this is not a left and right issue. This is an issue with both parties. Both of the parties have had the Epstein files available to them and available to, I shouldn't say available to release, because there is a legal process that needs to be followed in order to release these kinds of files, because it involves a lot of people. But the same thing that she's saying about the current administration, she could be saying about the previous administration. This is an Epstein victim who is using the fact that she's a victim to use the Epstein files as a political bargaining chip. I'm not saying she's getting paid, right? Because she probably isn't. She's probably saying this willingly because it's probably what she believes. But this is buying into the whole political identity. This is not something that should be politically motivated. This is, people don't like child molesters. And politics aside, there needs to be a general consensus on the agreement of this.
And then get upset when your own party goes against you because what is being done is wrong.
Where were these statements when Biden was in office? Because supporters of Democrats were also wanting these files to be released. So this is what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying that this is a Democratic or Republican party or an issue with the supporters of the Democrat and Republican parties. Adding that these kinds of statements should have been said earlier as well, because the Republicans were saying this when Biden was in office. So let's get into the bill that was passed so far. The bill requires the United States Department to publish unclassified records, documents, communication, and investigative material in its possession that relates to the investigation and prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein. This includes materials related to Ghislaine Maxwell, flight logs, and travel records, and individuals named or referenced. Department of Justice must do so in a searchable and downloadable format. That's going to be fun. Who doesn't like to search? Within 15 days after the required publication, Department of Justice must report to Congress all categories of information released and withheld. See, this is the thing. Like, you have a vote on a bill to release these documents, but there's still stuff that's going to be withheld. A summary of any redactions made, so already the premise is that there will be some redactions. 3, a list of all government officials and politically exposed individuals named or referenced in the published material. For number 3, we are going to see people from both sides that are going to be named. Just, it's what it is. Some guy has a nice plane, and you have people who like planes, private planes, and like to go in. Who doesn't like to go to an island? Whether or not they knew what kind of island they were going to, that's definitely going to be up for question, and it's definitely going to be something that the people who were on those flight logs will have to explain to their constituents. The bill explicitly prohibits withholding information based on embarrassment, reputational harm, or politically sensitive. I like that. That's pretty good. The Department of Justice is permitted to withhold or redact information that would identify victims or that would jeopardize an ongoing federal investigation. The victims who have stated that they have no problem with, I think those sorts of files should be released, but if there are victims that oppose the files being released, then they shouldn't be released. So I don't think that this should be so broad as to say information that would identify victims. I think that could have been a little bit more well written. And also, I do agree with the whole ongoing federal investigation, because what if you have like somebody from the WHO involved in this, or somebody in Israel involved in this? I mean, there have been many conspiracy theories floating around, or as some people may call them, conspiracy facts, because a lot of things in the past that have been conspiracies are now the truth. It's just there. I think there's a joke that says difference between the conspiracy and the truth is just a couple of days. So I asked the questions as in, what are the strings attached to the bill, right? The requirement to report to Congress means the Department of Justice must justify what was withheld and why. I like that. If you say you're not going to show something to the file when the people of the United States, along with the Senate and House and congressmen in general, and if you're saying we're going to withhold this information, I think you should be responsible, and you should come forth the Congress and say, we're not going to release this because. And I think the Congress should decide whether or not that's something that the Department of Justice should be withholding from the public. The prohibition of using embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity as reasons to withhold creates a stronger standard than typical disclosure laws. Allowing redactions for victims' identity on ongoing investigation means some parts will stay hidden. Those are trade-offs. Though the bill passes, the final release will be influenced by how the Department of Justice interprets those redactions, withholding allowance. Interpretation is always like an issue, and it has been the issue for many centuries, ever since we've had Congress, ever since we've had the Constitution. There's an entire field dedicated to interpretation of the law, and it's forever going to be a thing, because what you interpret as meaning something is completely different to what other people are going to interpret things. And especially when it comes to the laws, especially when it comes to how vague some of the laws are written. And I do wish that our founding fathers had written laws in a way where there was no room for interpretation, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment. Anyways, that's it for this video. Comment, like, and subscribe if you agree. If you disagree, feel free to leave some comments. Have a good day.